My name is David Miller. For years, my life was a meticulously cataloged existence, a symphony of quiet order within the hallowed, hushed halls of a New York public library. As head librarian for the Rare Books Division, my days were a comforting rhythm of preserving brittle manuscripts, deciphering faded marginalia, and guiding earnest researchers through centuries of forgotten lore. I thrived on the precision, the sheer, tangible volume of knowledge contained within those towering walls. My apartment on the Upper West Side was sparse, but comfortable, my routines as predictable as the Dewey Decimal System. I had a favorite coffee shop on Broadway, a familiar route through Central Park, and a quiet satisfaction in the predictable hum of my urban life. It was late autumn of 2005, and I was, by all accounts, content. Deeply, quietly content. Then came the call that rerouted my carefully constructed life. It wasn't a request, but more of an insistence from the senior partners at the specialized historical appraisal service I occasionally consulted for. They had been tasked with a monumental undertaking, appraising the vast, sprawling estate of the late Lord Ashworth. He was a notorious eccentric, a recluse whose wealth was matched only by his obsession with the arcane. Whispers followed his name, tales of a collection that veered wildly into the obscure, even the forbidden. His private archives, a significant if dusty part of his legacy, were to be my domain for the foreseeable future. I, the meticulous David Miller, was assigned to oversee the cataloging of this particular, peculiar asset. It felt less like a job offer and more like a summons. The Blackwood Archives. The name itself felt like something out of a Gothic novel, a place steeped in forgotten secrets, a name that tasted of ancient dust and untold stories. Nestled deep in the heart of Old Salem, Massachusetts, it was a grand, imposing building, a relic of a bygone era. Its dark, weathered stone walls were often damp with the chill of the New England coastal fog, which seemed to cling to the very air, muting all sound. Inside, it was a labyrinthine, dimly lit haven, the air thick with the comforting, yet strangely melancholic, scent of aged paper and leather. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of a page, every distant drip of water seemed to echo with history, with the whispers of those who had passed through its silent halls. It was a place where time seemed to slow, where the modern world felt impossibly distant, a stark, almost jarring contrast to the bustling, vibrant city library I'd left behind. Initially, it felt profoundly peaceful, almost sacred in its stillness, a sanctuary from the relentless pace of contemporary life. Yet beneath that tranquility, I sensed a strange, undeniable pull, a subtle hum that resonated deep within me, an ancient whisper calling my name, a low, persistent thrumming that I couldn't quite identify. What began as a temporary assignment, a mere formality in a larger appraisal, quickly became something more. The sheer scale and esoteric nature of the Ashworth collection were overwhelming, yet utterly captivating. I found myself drawn to the meticulous nature of archiving here, a surprising echo of my own precision, but with a deeper, almost spiritual resonance. The sheer volume of the Ashworth collection, its sheer strangeness, demanded more than a cursory glance. I began this task just last September, fully expecting to be done in weeks, to return to my familiar life in New York. But something held me here, an invisible tether, a growing fascination that I couldn't, or perhaps didn't want to shake. Days bled into weeks, weeks into the deepening chill of autumn, and still, I remained. IT was amidst this routine, this familiar dance of preservation that had surprisingly captivated me. On a particularly dreary Tuesday afternoon in October, the rain drumming a mournful, insistent rhythm against the archive's tall, narrow windows that I found it. Hidden beneath a stack of mundane ledgers from the 17th century, almost deliberately obscured, lay an unmarked, leather-bound journal. Its cover was a deep, almost black hide, unadorned, save for the faint, almost imperceptible texture of something ancient and primal beneath my fingertips. It stood out, anomalous, unsettling in its very lack of identity, its silence louder than any other artifact in the room. It felt less like a discovery and more like a preordained encounter, as if it had simply appeared, waiting for me, specifically for centuries.my curiosity, a professional hazard now intertwined with a growing, inexplicable fascination, was instantly piqued. A tremor, not of fear but of profound anticipation, ran through me. I carried the journal to my desk, the old oak groaning softly under its weight, a sound that seemed to sigh with anticipation, with a deep, ancient breath. My fingers, usually so steady, trembled slightly as I began to examine it, tracing its strange, alien symbols and its disturbing, almost grotesque illustrations. The leather felt unnaturally cold, a chill that seeped into my fingertips, yet strangely inviting, like a forbidden secret yearning to be unlocked, to reveal its dark heart. The images were unsettling, contorted figures with too many limbs, faces twisted in agony or ecstasy, geometries that defied logic and twisted the eye, scenes of ritualistic horror that made my skin crawl even then, a cold dread seeping into my bones. They seemed to shift in the flickering gaslight of the archive, their lines blurring, their forms subtly changing, whispering ancient secrets that only I could hear, a low, guttural murmur just at the edge of my perception, a sound that resonated in the very marrow of my bones, driven by duty, yes, but more so by a burgeoning intellectual fascination that felt increasingly like an irresistible compulsion, a force beyond my control. I embarked on the painstaking process of translation. It was slow, arduous work, often stretching late into the Salem nights, the thick fog pressing against the leaded windows like a hungry specter, obscuring the outside world entirely. I delved into obscure languages, forgotten dialects, and ciphers I'd only read about in dusty academic texts, my mind straining against the unknown, against the very fabric of reality. But as I worked, the journal seemed to respond to my touch. The pages warmed subtly beneath my fingertips, a faint, rhythmic pulse emanating from the ancient parchment, revealing insights that felt eerily personal, almost as if it knew me, as if it had been waiting for me specifically for generations. Each translated word was a victory, yes, but also a step deeper into something I couldn't comprehend, a descent into an unknown abyss, a growing sense of dread mingling with exhilarating, terrifying discovery. Gradually, the text unveiled ancient rituals, forbidden knowledge, and a pact with an unspeakable entity. The true horror of its nature slowly dawned on me, accompanied by chilling hints of a specific lineage, a bloodline connected to this pact. A cold dread began to settle in my bones, a creeping certainty that this was no mere historical document, particularly as I deciphered a passage mentioning the blood of Miller. I unearthed passages hinting at a desperate bargain struck by Lysander Miller, my ancestor, centuries ago. It wasn't for power, I realized with a jolt of recognition that sent shivers down my spine, but for protection against a devastating blight that threatened to consume Salem, a plague, a famine, something truly catastrophic. Or perhaps, the text suggested, to unlock hidden knowledge to advance humanity beyond its current limits, to ascend to a higher plane of understanding. But the language hinted at a terrible price, a slow corruption of their original, noble intentions, a perversion of the pact over generations, turning a shield into a subtle, insidious chain, a bond of servitude. Then, the symbols began to appear in my life. At first, they were so subtle, I dismissed them as fatigue or imagination, a faint, temporary mark on my hand, gone when I looked again, usually after a long night of translation. It felt less like random occurrences and more like a deliberate calling, a recognition, a silent acknowledgement. A fleeting mark, like a smudge on my arm, often appearing after I'd fallen asleep at my desk in the archive, my head resting on a pile of ancient texts. I rubbed it, and it vanished by morning, leaving a faint phantom itch, a ghost of sensation that lingered. A quick glimpse of a symbol in the polished surface of my spectacles, or in the old, wavy mirror in my small apartment in Salem. A trick of the light, I told myself, a momentary optical illusion, but the image lingered in my mind, a persistent afterimage, haunting my peripheral vision. Vague, unsettling dreams, filled with the symbols and echoes of the rituals, hinted at a deeper, disturbing connection I couldn't quite grasp. I'd wake with a gasp, the chill of the archive still clinging to me, a sense of something ancient stirring within, something that felt increasingly like me, a part of my very being. The occurrences became more frequent, more undeniable. They began to take on a more active, guiding role in my life, particularly as November deepened, the days growing shorter, the shadows longer, stretching like grasping fingers across the archive floor. Clearer marks appeared distinctly on my skin, in more prominent places like my neck or wrist, lingering longer, sometimes seeming to pulse with a faint, dark energy, especially when I was near the journal. They felt less like a foreign mark and more like an awakening, a part of me coming to life, a dormant power stirring, flowing through my veins. They were clearly visible in my reflections, shifting, writhing, their lines moving like unseen currents just beneath the surface of the glass. I started to glimpse fleeting, monstrous forms lurking just behind my own image, gone in a blink, but leaving a chill that seeped into my bones, a cold dread that settled deep in my marrow, and a growing, terrifying sense that I was seeing through myself into another realm, a dimension of pure, ancient horror, a place of unspeakable things. My dreams became full-blown nightmares, no longer vague, but pulling me directly into the journal's narrative. I experienced fragments of the rituals as if I were there, a participant, not an observer. I felt the entity's presence, its cold, foul breath on my neck, its unseen tendrils brushing my mind, probing, seeking entry. Sleep offered no escape. Instead, the dreams subtly, insidiously guided me toward specific, terrifying passages in the journal, often revealing details I hadn't yet translated, as if the journal itself was speaking to me through my subconscious, urging me onward, compelling me to finish its dark work, its ancient purpose that I became increasingly isolated, consumed by the journal and the manifestations. My obsession transformed into a terrifying battle of wills. I tried to rationalize, to hide what was happening, to dismiss it as exhaustion or a breakdown, to convince myself I was simply overworked. I fought the compelling urge to continue the translation, to put the journal away, to burn it, to rid myself of its insidious influence. But an unseen force, the curse itself, relentlessly drew me back, its tendrils wrapping around my mind, tightening with each passing hour, each translated word. I stopped returning to my apartment, sleeping on a cot in a forgotten corner of the archive, surrounded by the very source of my torment, the outside world fading into irrelevance, its sounds muffled, its concerns distant, like echoes from another life. Other duties became meaningless. I withdrew from the few colleagues I had, ignoring their concerned glances, their polite inquiries, their worried expressions, spending all my waking hours hunched over the cursed pages. My only companion was the journal, its secrets becoming my sole, terrifying purpose, my reason for existing. Paranoia gnawed at me, a constant, insidious whisper in my ear. Fear became a constant companion, yet intertwined with it was a terrifying fascination, a morbid curiosity I couldn't extinguish, a desperate need to know the truth, no matter the cost. The line between reality and the journal's world blurred, and I felt my own mind being subtly, horrifyingly influenced, my thoughts no longer entirely my own, but echoing ancient whispers, a chorus of forgotten voices, a symphony of madness. It was in the dead of late November, during a particularly violent New England storm that rattled the archive's very foundations, that I reached the critical point. The wind howled like a banshee, a mournful cry against the ancient stone. Rain lashed against the windows, a relentless drumming. The gaslights flickered erratically, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with the symbols now etched into my very being, pulsating with an inner light. The final translation wasn't just an understanding of the pact or the entity's nature. It was a horrifying truth that shattered my world, yet simultaneously offered a glimmer of desperate hope, a fragile thread of light in the encroaching darkness. The journal wasn't a random, cursed object. It was an ancient family heirloom, passed down through generations of the Miller lineage. I was a direct descendant of the original pact maker, Lysander Miller, and the ritual detailed within was incomplete. It was meant to be a benevolent power, a shield for Salem, a source of profound knowledge to guide humanity. But the entity had twisted its terms over centuries, demanding a continuous lineage to serve as its archivist or conduit to maintain the protection, which slowly became a form of subtle control and a draining influence, a parasitic bond that fed on my ancestors. My role was not just to complete a dark ritual, but to re-establish the original, benevolent intent of the pact, to master the entity's power and reclaim it from its corrupted state. The symbols on my skin weren't just a curse. They were a birthright, a mark of my destined, terrifying potential for control, not servitude. My ancestors have been waiting for me for centuries, their silent pleas echoing through the journal. And I, David Miller, was the final key to either their damnation or their redemption. The last word was translated. A deafening crack of thunder shook the archive, and the symbols exploded into existence everywhere. On the archive walls, across the dusty bookshelves, in the very air around me, pulsating with a dark, hungry energy that seemed to vibrate through my bones, through the very foundations of the building. The entity's presence became not just palpable, but welcoming, recognizing me as its destined conduit, its voice a deafening roar in my mind, a cacophony of ancient sounds. The archive itself seemed to shift and transform around me, its familiar order dissolving into a chaotic, unholy ritual space. The shelves twisted into grotesque shapes. The very ceiling seemed to recede into an infinite blackness, revealing swirling abyssal forms, eyes that watched from the void. Overpowering sounds, a putrid, ancient smell like damp earth and decay, and a chilling cold that pierced my very soul washed over me. But now, horrifyingly, laced with a sense of familiarity, a belonging, a strange comfort in the chaos. Whispers, ancient and guttural, filled my mind, calling my name, pulling me deeper, but now I could discern a faint, desperate plea beneath the malevolence, a yearning for release, a desire to be freed from its own twisted, corrupted existence. The curse culminated in a terrifying completion of destiny. The symbols fully integrated with me, not physically altering me in grotesque ways, but granting me a profound, agonizing understanding and control over the entity's power. I felt the ancient knowledge flood my mind, a torrent of information, visions of past rituals, of Lysander Miller's desperate hope and the entity's insidious betrayal, of countless lives lived under its shadow. The entity's malevolent influence battled my will, a cosmic tug of war for my very soul, for the fate of Salem, for the redemption of my lineage, for the balance of the world itself. But I fought, channeling the original intent of the pact, the pure, desperate hope of Lysander Miller, the generations of suppressed power within my blood, a surge of righteous fury. I forced the entity to bend to my purpose. I was no longer compelled to participate in a horrific ritual, but rather commanded the final act, severing its malevolent grip while retaining its beneficial aspects, the vast knowledge it held, the protective energy it could wield. I was fully pulled into the journal's narrative, into the very heart of the pact, into the core of its being. But I emerged as its master, not its slave, my mind a crucible of ancient power and modern resolve, forged anew in the fires of cosmic struggle. My original identity dissolved, yes, but it was replaced not by emptiness, not by a void, but by a terrifying new self, a guardian, a conduit of ancient power, a new, powerful agent for good. My meticulously ordered mind was now a vast repository of both forbidden knowledge and profound wisdom, and I felt a horrifying, yet ultimately righteous, sense of purpose, a solemn duty to the world, a burden I was now destined to carry. Weeks later, perhaps in early December, the archive would eventually be found. It was quiet, seemingly undisturbed, but with a palpable sense of renewed, protective energy that hummed faintly in the air, a gentle warmth that permeated the old stone walls, a silent guardian. I would still be there, profoundly changed, the symbols still etched on my skin, but now they glowed faintly with a benevolent light, marks of my power and control, not of a curse. I was no longer isolated by fear, but by the sheer weight of my new responsibility, a silent sentinel in the heart of Salem, a library of living knowledge, its secrets now mine to command. The journal itself was not gone. Its pages were blank, its dark power transferred to me, its malevolent influence neutralized, transformed. It remained on my desk, a silent testament to the battle won, a relic of a past that I had finally set right, a history rewritten by my hand, its destiny fulfilled. Subtle signs indicated that the ritual was successful and the entity's influence had been repurposed. The archive now carried a new, subtle aura, not dread, but a gentle, protective energy that seemed to ward off shadows, a warmth that countered the usual coastal chill, a sense of peace. Whispers might still circulate amongst the few who dared to enter, but they would be of a new guardian, a silent protector of Salem, a legend born from the dust of forgotten history, a legend that was me, David Miller, the archivist who saved a town that my fate is sealed. I am now eternally bound to the entity's power, but as its master, not its victim. My existence is a profound transformation, one of terrifying power, as I have become a new conduit for the entity's repurposed will. I am still the lone archivist, but now a guardian of more than just documents. I use the knowledge and power gained to ward off future threats to Salem, to subtly guide humanity towards a brighter future, and to ensure that such dark knowledge never falls into the wrong hands again. My days are still filled with meticulous work, but now it is the meticulous work of safeguarding a town, a legacy, a world, a silent protector in a world that doesn't know it needs one, a quiet hero in the shadows. The curse is broken, or rather, it has been transformed. The entity is bound, its malevolence purged, its power now channeled for good, a silent protector rather than a looming threat. The story ends with hope, a sense of balance restored to Salem, and I, David Miller, stand as a silent sentinel, a living archive of both ancient darkness and newfound light, ensuring the cycle of corruption is finally broken, and a new era of quiet vigilance begins, a vigilance that will last for as long as I draw breath.